Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. Just getting a afternoon edition of the feedback loop up and running. Looks like we're live here on YouTube, so that's fantastic. Not expecting anybody to be joining us today because really with feedback loop is really meant to be focused on primarily on giving feedback on work. So students who are coming through the program, they have an opportunity every day to get live feedback from me on the work that they're doing. A couple of students, former students, have reached out over the weekend and asked for feedback on work that they're currently going through. So I'm going to switch over now. In the event that you have work that you're working on that you would like reviewed before we open up our full-time enrollment, which starts in June, know that you can do that right down here. It says video feedback delivered daily, submit work for review. It's a tiny link on the site right now because it's not something that we're really advertising to the public, because really it's meant for just people who have been part of the program for a while, and soon it'll be available for all active students. So the first thing I want to do is we've got a couple of portfolios. One here is from Myrel Abaya, and first of all, when you have a tough to pronounce name, and when I say tough, I'm like Irish dude. I have zero ability to pronounce names. I really do like it when somebody breaks it down for me and helps me understand how to say it. Myrel or Myrel. The real helpful thing here is you don't get into a situation where you're like, oh hey you, which I got to be honest with you, I do that a lot, and it's not because I'm not aware of what your name is. It's because I'm unaware of how to properly pronounce your name. But here with Myrel, that you've got that right out front. I feel better right away about having a conversation with you. She has provided her portfolio to take a look at, to begin digging into. In addition, we have another portfolio here from Sharon, and Sharon's actually asked us to take a look at her SkySpace case study, and she's also been nice enough to provide a link to her prototype as well. So with that, we've got SkySpace here. We've got Sharon's case study, and then we've also got Myrel's portfolio. The big thing that I like to do when I'm first digging into portfolios is I like to make sure that I really understand who this is from, where they're at, and what they're interested in doing. And luckily for us, Myrel's really broken it down for us. They're a UX UI designer and developer from Dallas, Texas. That's kind of signaling that you're both interested in design and coding. But when you put that designer and developer out there, I would just say I'm a designer, but everybody has a little different way of seeing themselves. So I think it's right. It's good to use the right descriptor for you. You're in Dallas, Texas. This is really important because if you're applying for a job that is, say, in LA, and you're in Dallas, then that's going to immediately tell me. If I'm hiring for remote, then I can talk to you, and that's fine. I can hire from anywhere. But if I'm hiring for LA, I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste my time. So I'm not going to move forward with having this discussion. Now, I had this question come up over the weekend from another former student who is looking at moving cross country, and they were saying that they were getting very few nibbles, and they had California listed in their description of where they're at, but they're applying for jobs in Colorado. Another former student of mine, and I'm going to just see if I can find her portfolio really quickly, jennyhanlon.com. If I'm and I've talked about this not updating portfolios thing. Jenny was currently working in the Bay Area and dreaming of the Rocky Mountains. She wanted to move to Denver. Placing that in there, and letting somebody know what your intentions are. You're currently in one spot, but you're wanting to go somewhere else, is really helpful. Jenny was able to make the leap. She moved from a company in the San Francisco area to a company in Denver. One of the things that helped was she found a remote gig working for somebody in Denver while she was working in San Francisco. And then when she eventually moved, she was able to make that transition pretty seamlessly. So for you, as I work my way back over to this portfolio, for you, you've got to, if you're really set in on North Texas, that Dallas Fort Worth area, this is great. The other thing I would say is, like, when I look at this, it feels really large, and I want to make sure I've got this at 100%, and I do. As you can see up here in the corner, it's 100%. Really, this page is like, everything's really large, and when I compare it to, say, Brown of Pisana, let's go over here to Bree's portfolio. I'll look at Bree's. Bree's is pretty big too. Oh, actually, it's zoomed in. Okay, so there's Bree's. Let's look at Pankill Ministries. Let's see, Pankill. Yeah, his is at 100%. But you get a kind of sense of scale and size when you look at some of your peers. And, this is zoomed out right now. Like, I'm at 90%. That's at 100%. 90% feels so much better. It feels less congested. I would consider just taking everything down a step. I think all the information that you have here is pretty good. I think however you have this anchored, I don't know if you're using vertical height or not. I could honestly check that, but we'll look at the code behind this in a second. I would just adjust this to where it's really down here. I might even make this little bouncing arrow just a little smaller. This is all about restraint. Here feels a little less restrained, a little more crowded. Here it's just a little more even. If we go over here and let's look at your compatriot Sharon. Sharon's portfolio is really restrained, and I think does a good job of using spacing. It's always interesting. People always ask the question, should I use a photo of myself? And Sharon's kind of snuck one in there without showing anything. And it really comes across as I'm a little more arty than the typical product designer or the typical UX designer. This little flare of illustration is shining through. I'm not entirely sure if that's the plan, but it's certainly what I'm getting as somebody who's viewing this for the first time. Let's go back over here. I want to take a second and jump into the code, because if you're not utilizing web dev tools as you go to check out how your portfolio would look on various devices, I think it's a big missed opportunity. Right now, I got to be honest with you. I'm looking at this in a responsive frame. I'm going to go ahead and throw it like on an iPhone X. And I got to say that this leaves a lot to be desired. This project resume, contact about. This is typically where somebody would either make a clear-cut edit for, like, I'm going to take this list, and I'm guessing this is a list. Let's take a look at it. It's up here in this row, and I'm going to guess it's like a bunch of LIs. And yeah, it is. It's a bunch. Nope. That's okay. So you got this flexed off to one side and then flexed off to the other, which is smart. You're just using a little flex box there. And what I would suggest doing is either subbing that out on a responsive size for the ye old hamburger, or I would really focus it on just put projects up there. Like, when I come to this page, I know that most people are looking for my projects. I'm gonna put projects as a link, and I'm just gonna put all my chips on that, because they're not coming here to look at my resume. They're not coming here to read my about. They're not coming here to contact me. Not on a phone. Like they're looking at this. The hiring manager is looking at this on their phone, thinking, I got to fit this in my lunch hour. Like, what am I looking for? If you've got projects right here, that's going to serve you well. If you want to put the hamburger up there, that's fine too. But either way, this right now is stacking really it's not great. And then as I come through, the thing that right now this name display that you have here, I'm guessing this is probably some sort of like script font that you've got, and that's fine. I might sit here and you've got line height of 100%. I really think pulling it in and making it feel more like a cohesive unit, particularly on the mobile device, would be ideal. This feels really like an uncomfortable, like your typography is, you're not quite comfortable with your typography yet based on what I'm seeing here. I'm going to go in and let's just see. Well, it says that is okay. Check out my work. That must be okay. So that's the little bouncing arrow thing at the bottom. Let's go in here. I'm just curious what font this is in. Feels like it might be something like just Helvetica or whatever. And I'm not sure why this is not. Oh, it's because you don't have it. Okay, so you've got a span on it. You got a span for the bracket, but then there's no tag on this. So it's really just defaulting to, the sans serif that you have, and that's why this is out of alignment with the rest of your page. Because when you get down here, your little slogan, that's in an H4, and in that H4 you're using quicksand. Okay. And what I really want to see is I want to see quicksand being used on that MyRel as well. So yeah, that would fix that issue. I do think that you've got some. Oh, okay, and now I see that this is like this is got a Z index of like 1 or something on it. So as you scroll up, look at how much space. And I'm going to get rid of this from the iPhone X. Let's just go and look at it on like a Pixel 2. Okay, look at how much space you're giving up. And so that we can see it, I'm going to come up here to the very top, and I just want to color this something different so it's a little easier for everybody who's playing along at home to see. Okay, here it is. I'm going to give this a background color of just red. Okay, so now that's in red, right? Look at how much space on the phone screen you're giving up because you've got that stack up there. It's not great. Now, if I were to go in here and just simplify this to what we were talking about just a moment ago, and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to get rid of some of these LIs. Do you see how both sides begin to shrink down? Oh, and it says it has a drop down here. I wonder why that's not being triggered. Yeah, okay, well, it looks like you've got a drop down. I'm not entirely sure why your drop down isn't being triggered, but it's not, clearly. So I'd take a look at that. Regarding this top nav, it looks like you've got a height of 10 rem that's on it. I'd probably stay away from that and do something more like padding, and then let's do 10 rem. Wow, that's crazy. Let's not do that. Let's do 1 rem. To the top and bottom, and 2 rem to the sides. And let's make sure, let's do, I guess if I could do 3. Okay, so that's not quite doing what I wanted to do. Let's take another look at what's going on here. So you must have some extra spacing going on inside of it. So flex 1. Do we have a height set up here? I don't think we do. But rather than, let's go ahead and pull this apart just a little bit. Rather than putting the padding there, what if we just put it here? That didn't hold it, and I don't necessarily know why. There's got to be a height that's set on this. That's there. I believe that. Yeah, there it is. So you've got to see, you got this height set on navbar, And because you had a height set on it, it's going to stick to that, even if the elements around it are wanting to go outside of that. Be careful about set heights. If you have to use a height, use like min height, because that'll say, okay, you need to be a set minimum height. But if you're more than that, it'll go with you. That's why a lot of CSS, when I see CSS that looks broken, it's typically because a damn height or width has been forced upon something, and that's what was happening here. So you had a height set on it, and it was causing all sorts of problems. And you had a height set on an ID of navbar under a particular, oh, actually you had a height set and then reset. Just something to keep an eye out for. And then on this background color, as you go up, you typically, particularly on modern phones, you have the ability to see behind it, and that's typically set when we do like an RGBA, and that's red, green, blue, alpha. And now I'm just gonna set some crazy color on it. Okay, so that's red, and then I'm gonna put like a 0.7 on it. All right, and what you should see right away is you can see through it now. Now, you may not want a 0.7, you may want a 0.9 because that's closer to your red, but you still get a sense of where you're at, and you can see through it. So that would be something I would consider doing. And keep in mind, in your case, you had this like, it wasn't a gray, it was more of a, or it wasn't a black, it was more of a white. So you're more like that. And that gives you a real sense of like, not only definition, but space, okay, and depth. So look at that. I think there's some more cleanup that needs to be done here. Let's look at your show and tell. That's a lot of space between these elements. Yeah, I would tighten this up, because I think if I remember your projects right, Pix, yeah, it looks like that's Pix, right? Yeah, that's PX. So these are related. I would soak up some of the space here. Same thing here. Same thing here. God, that I can't. I forgot about that project. Yeah, you know, overall, this isn't bad, but it needs some work. And I think we've picked up on a few things. Soak up this space up here as well, although some of that is that forced height that you have. And let's go ahead and refresh this, so you get a better idea of where it started at. And let's go back, and I'm going to get out of this responsive mode that we're in. And I just want to kind of look at the rest of the page. Okay, so you've got, you know, what's interesting about this is right now, as I'm hovered over it, it feels like this is devoid of anything. What I might suggest doing is going back to that alpha channel mentality, and instead of fading it all the way away, I'd like leave it at like a 10% opacity, so that as you hover over, you still get a sense of what you're looking at, but you can clearly read this text, instead of making it go all the way away. Let's continue down. So here, okay, it looks like for some reason this is on a different size. Here, this one, yeah, this one's now off center. So there's some clear work that needs to be done. The easiest thing to do here would be to find a way to make these all the same size. If I was doing this in like React, I would have one component for each of these, and then I would shove information in, which means that all of my sizes would be standardized. Here you've got like, this is one size, this is another size, this is another size. You need to standardize it. But add a little more space down here, so that, you know, there's some separation. But, you know, you have all the bits that I'm looking for. I'm going to go into your case study. Notice how slow that's loading. That's that's kind of an interesting illustration. It's weird that it has like these hard edges. I would make it just go edge to edge. So, you know, I get a sense of the flow here. I honestly haven't seen an illustration quite like this. I don't typically get into the showing the desktop, because I mean, it's not like you designed the computer. But yeah, as I'm looking in here, like it starts off very centered and then immediately flows over to the right. I might try to lean into that a little harder and just say, okay, it's just going to be on, or not to the right, to the left. I might lean into that a little harder and just place it over to the left. A case study on designing a more personable and designing a personable and more focused cloud storage. Cloud storage what? This doesn't seem like a finished, like a case study on designing a personable and more focused cloud storage system, cloud storage platform. Like there's something missing there. Let's go look at your prototype really fast. Okay, so this is an Adobe XD mockup, and what does it allow me to see? I'm not sure. Man, Adobe loads really slow by comparison to this Envision prototype that just like lightning fast from Sharon. Adobe's still loading here, so at least we know that it's there. But something to keep in mind when you're I might say view Adobe XD prototype just to kind of place the onus on Adobe for the speed issue. Premise: most cloud storage apps in the market attempt to do everything and store all file types. Pix is a cloud storage service that only stores photos and videos because personal expression deserves its own space. I might say that Pix is focused on personal expression and stores only photos and videos. Like shorten it, like you focus first on like, oh, it only stores the type rather than why. The why is important here. You're focused on personal expression. This is meant to be about personal expression, not like stuff you do at work. During my 32-week design apprenticeship at Block, I just did this, and here's my client brief, and the problem, and the solution, and the role, deliverables, and tools, and then research and discovery, competitive analysis. It doesn't feel like a link. I might do something more to like it says view competitive analysis, but I might give it some sort of color. Goals. This also is pretty small. Like I want to look at the size of this just to kind of get a sense of what I'm looking at. Looks like it wants to be 16. It looks like it wants to be 15. If I just put font size 14 on here, am I going to end up with something? Okay, it got smaller, so it's got to be 15, 16. Yeah, I think this is a case where the font you're using just doesn't have a lot of heft. Yeah, it's quicksand. It looks like it's quicksand. Let's go up here a bit. So line height is 210, and that's fine. But I really think that if you're wanting to use this particular font, it wants 18 at minimum. You can see the difference between 18 and 16. Like this is pretty easy to read. This is pretty hard to read. And then you jump back over to this very sans serif-y style. And I mean, it's like this is just stock sans serif by comparison to what you have here. Yeah, there's some font issues that I would like. I want the same font that you have here, or I want something that's radically different from I want a serif here rather than another sans serif. So the font selection here is less than ideal. At least the pairings that you have that are going on. The structure, I'm not sure why I'm over here, particularly when I get down here and it's centered again. It's either I want you to find you need to find a rhythm here. right now, like we have something that's centered, we have something that's centered, we have it left aligned, and then we come back to the center here, then we come back to the center here, centered, then left aligned, centered, and the unit itself is centered, and then like start off left aligned, then you're back to center. It's fighting itself right now, and it only gets more jarring when I view it in a full frame. And all I'm talking about here is structure. I haven't really even jumped into the actual content yet. If you're zooming through here and you're looking for the assets, like view competitive analysis is just kind of squeezed in here between. View survey is just kind of squeezed in here between. What I would advise you to do is go study some other portfolios for help in finding a rhythm that works. When I look over here at Penn Keels, let's go look at this Montero case study. And as you're going through Montero, so you find right away there's a summary and it's off to the left, and there's a little image here, and that's fine. It's the same sizes, but they're flipped. So what he's trying to do is get the attention of the user to cross over. So I've been in summary, and now I'm in challenge, and then I'm back to solution. And these illustrations and the placement, it's very much like a landing page. Like if we look over here at Sharon's landing page for Skyspace, which was again her version of the cloud storage site, you're starting over here to the right. You start over here to the left, then you move over to the right, then you come back to the center. This rhythm begins to establish itself. If I jump into Sharon's case study, and she's wanting feedback on her case study as well, the rhythm is a lot more restrained. Like there is some variation here. There's there's a narrow measure, a wider measure, a narrow measure, a narrow measure. It feels like that's roughly the same. Now we've got too wide, but they're still operating from a centered perspective. So everything is centered all the way down, and sometimes going wider. This is a little easier for me to cruise through. There are little things like this, the ability to kind of see where you're at. That's off to the side. This navigation, prototypes, and testing. I think there's just a little more nuance there than what we've got here, and so much of this is a lack of refinement of the typography. That's kind of I don't want to say it's messing it up, because you can use any typography you like, but it doesn't feel as refined as it could. And some of the, when I look at this, I immediately think back to what we saw on your homepage, where you had a span, but this is in a H3. So my question here with your H3 is, okay, your font family is Droid Sans. Droid Sans is not a dramatic step away from Quicksand, so it defaults back to Quicksand when I do this. If you were going to do something different, like that, like I just put in serif, just like whatever serif you've got, that is far more of a distinction than Droid Sans versus serif. Typically when we're looking at typography, we want either it to be a distinctive, clear, like serif versus sans serif. We want it to be something that is very clear to tell in hierarchical terms. So I've got Quicksand bold and then Quicksand regular, but Quicksand bold is being displayed 3 times larger than Quicksand regular. So you set your hierarchy that way. That's very simple. Like I've got one font that I'm working with. Another way to do it is if you had Droid Sans condensed, which would be a structural difference. Like I'm going to take Droid Sans, and I'm going to use it, but it's going to be condensed, and then Quicksand's going to be regular or expanded. Now I've got some sort of difference in structure that allows me to use two sans serifs together. This is where your ability to utilize typography begins to talk more to your expertise as a designer. Like this is where you begin channeling, like, yeah, I'm talking to you about a case study, but I'm actually showing you how I organize information. Right now, the way you're organizing information is it's not great. Okay, I think you've probably got better research here than you have in terms of you've probably got research here, but all I'm noticing are the little inconsistencies in the organization. So we want to really focus on, what is the grid that you want to use throughout this, and what is the typography that you can use that will not clash in the way. And I hate using the term clash. This is more just muddled. Quicksand and Droid Sans, they feel very similar to one another. So I would either find a way to get rid of one of them and just use like Quicksand or Droid Sans, or find a way to pull in another typeface for emphasis, getting rid of probably Droid Sans because you've used Quicksand everywhere else, and pulling in like Playfair Display or Georgia, or something condensed, so that you can play off of those differences. And I will have a session upcoming that'll be on the YouTube channel, really focused on. I've actually got 4 planned sessions on typography, so hopefully those will help in instances like this. But that's my feedback right now for it. I think you really, before you start applying, you've got to do a structural overhaul on this to bring more cohesion to it. Again, we can go over to Brianna Pisana, and another former student, and look at her case. Like, let's look at one of her case studies. Aside from the fact that, she's integrated her homepage in with the actual design of the prototype, she has a clear structure set up, and you can follow it pretty much all the way down. It's gonna dominate here. She's got labels off to the left. You've got these little illustrations and whatnot in the background for these smaller areas. We'll keep on going. Illustration, back to the grid, illustration, findings, personas, back to the grid. She's using now 2 columns on that grid. Back to the grid. Notice it's real easy to pick out where the links are for the extra bits of work. This is the stuff that's really important. Phase 2, similar labeling, and this could probably be improved upon a bit, but I'm not going to tell you that the person who got a job at Apple should overhaul their portfolio. It was good enough for Apple. So if it's good enough for Apple, good enough for me. So let's move on, though, because I did get another request here for Sharon's portfolio. And, Sharon's in a slightly different spot. When I look at this, I am struck that, if I go over to the actual prototype is really nicely done. There's some nice visual organization to this. It feels, when I see this, I go, yeah, that could be a company. This could be a legit thing. I would like to see it. Typically speaking, I would like to see these things in a working model, not just an envisioned prototype. But I'm not going to get hung up on that. Places where the design falls down on itself are typically in areas like this. This typography is really pretty small. I don't get caught up on Skyspace and login, but when I look at this form feels very small by comparison with what I would be presented at another in another sign-up flow. So I'm going to go ahead and create an account, lift off we go. This feels very close to what I would expect. There are some things that you'll notice, like here. This really doesn't feel like a pop-up. if I were to come over here and say, find OBS, uh, find OBS, when I look at that drop down versus that drop down, this is just larger. Okay, the typography over here is just frankly too small, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and hit that, and we'll get this, and off we go. The other thing you'll notice, and this is something that you want to think about if you're watching this, you want to think about this when you're designing your projects. What are the limitations that I'm building into my design? Because every design that you work on will have a breakpoint. And the breakpoint that I notice right here is, down here in this recent documents immediately it's limited to a number of characters. And I wonder if we have to, is there a design tweak that can be made here that would solve for this issue? Because I got to be honest with you, there's a lot of recent documents. Like I do a lot of screen captures and whatnot. My screen capture strings are forever long. If I threw them into this design, it would just be a bunch of crap down here with little icons to the side. It wouldn't be useful. So these are like limitations on space. Typically speaking, because I have a long name, Christopher, that's my first name, I am a little more in tune with, oh my God, don't put a username in a place where it might get truncated off, because that's the last thing somebody wants to see. This is a kind of a similar thing. So that's something to keep in mind. But let's go back to your case study. I like the overall style. I think that there's a couple of areas where it can be tweaked. When we go into your roles, tools, results, time, that's all pretty much the stuff I'm looking for. I like it right away, seeing that you utilize several tools that could have been you could have used just Sketch or just InVision or just Illustrator or just Figma. You decided to use all of them. I'm going to have questions there. You worked on it from June to October. That's a lot of time, so I'm going to have questions there as well. You've identified your problem and solution. You've also done a nice job of breaking down the different areas. So if I'm interested in information architecture, I can skip right over that research bit. If I'm more drawn to prototypes and testing, I can go right down to that as well. I might offer up a return to top with some of these because otherwise I'm just kind of scrolling around. So on your survey, research and discovery, you did some surveys, and I like the fact that you have broken down what the key findings of those were. I also like the fact that I can kind of go in here and view the survey if I want to. I would hope that in the future you wouldn't lead with surveys. Surveys are like a data point. Here it's presented like it's the data point. I think the strength here is right here. Like, who's the competition? Who'd you talk to? What'd you find out? User stories, you kind of set, you say, hey, I'm heading off in this direction. Here's what I'm trying to solve. You're showing me some flows here. Brand, story, and logo. It's it's nice. It's a very nice logo. All told. Tone and voice. So here's your mood board. We're getting into some usage of color. One thing that's always interesting when I see colors is, are you able to stay within that palette as you design and begin to stretch out? And obviously, just one look at your overall design, I can tell that. I would encourage you to kind of go the route of a Montero and look at how can I get that image larger on the screen when you're leading. That's Brianna does the same thing. Good job of doing this. With your case study, it feels really small. And I don't know if it's just as simple as, you know, I'm going to kick that off. I'm going to kick that off. I don't think this has to go like full width. But I think that seeing that main screen larger, even if it's cut off, even if you're just showing part of it, I think we would be better off than what you have at the moment. You know, you could even do a thing where you borrow from Brianna, you carry the diagonal line all the way up, and then you place that on the diagonal line. I think there's a lot that can be done here, but your approach is pretty subtle. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Your brand and story, you know, your visual design is probably, the visual design of the app is probably a highlight. Here you have your wireframes and lo-fi. I always love seeing like the design started here on a scrap piece of paper, and then I took it in. That shows a willingness to step away from the computer and begin thinking before you sit down to some sort of drawing app. I always think that's a good sign to see in a designer. So here you're showing before after. So apparently, you know, you altered your design. Here again, you altered your design. These are things that are very good to see when I'm considering hiring a designer, because it shows that you can back away from ideas and grow based on feedback. As we continue to go further down, you've clearly called out, like, you know, your learning moments. Skyspace taught me that the constant feedback loop, hey, name of the show, build, measure, implement, and repeat is invaluable. I agree entirely. That's why I do feedback loop with my students every day. Thanks for reading. Yeah, let's take a look over here. Just want to kind of see how you got a TLDR, the scientist. Oh my God, we got a scientist in the house. That's crazy. I've said it before. You can go too small. I just kind of want to look at what you've got here. 1.6. I'm guessing that's based on 10. You know, if you go up to 18, it feels better. It feels a little more readable. I just want to inspect element here, and let's see how it works on a phone. That's pretty nice. I'm not sure where the curve, like the curve appears once and then doesn't appear again. So I'm not really sure if is that really working? I don't know. Let's see what you got here. Home, work about. So go back to work. Here's Skyspace. So I want to just take a look at that container real quick. Let's go in. It's up here in your nav bar. Fix menu. Yeah, this is pretty nice, and just kind of seeing how you're triggering things. Let's go into your head. Case study, keywords, simple style sheet. Yeah, this is really nice. We've got some typekit fonts in here. Sophia's a nice font. Yeah, you had Playfair. It felt like Playfair was involved here somewhere. Okay, yeah, Sharon. Overall, this is pretty nice. I'm looking for possibly some more expression, some like bolder presentation of the visual work. I want to get that really fast because it's clear that you can do it. So let's get that shelved right away. It's like, okay, I'm a pretty good visual designer. Now let's talk about research. Like I don't want to have that lingering. Like I just want to go, wow, she's pretty good. Let's look at her research. And I think that's possible here. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we're going to wrap this edition of feedback loop. My name is Chris Courtney. Thank you so much for participating. We'll be back on Wednesday with Thinking in Systems. This magnificent book. This magnificent book by Donella Meadows. We're going to be diving into it, looking at some of the different ways that your work impacts the society that is around you. And I hope to talk to all of you then. Take care.